$1 levy on plastic bags proposed to take effect on December 31st. The bill that would scrap the MPF offsetting mechanism passes its second reading in LegCo. And in the U.S., FDA advisors back the Novavax COVID vaccine.
Hello and welcome to TVB News. The government has proposed amending a bill on doubling the levy on plastic bags from 50 cents to $1.
Authorities plan to raise the price by the end of the year, but environmental groups say the wording of the bill has gray areas. Timothy Lee has more.
Beginning in 2009, the plastic bag levy was implemented in supermarkets and convenience stores. A full implementation of the plastic bag levy came into effect in 2015, when all retailers are required to charge 50 cents for each plastic bag distributed. According to government surveys, the number of discarded plastic bags in the first year of the universal levy dropped by 25% compared to the previous year. The government now suggests an amendment to the bill which will increase the price of plastic bags to $1 each, which will come into effect by December 31st. Under the amended bill, some current items exempted from the plastic bag levy, such as frozen and non-airtight packaged food, will no longer be given exemptions. And free plastic bags will not be given for purchase of boxed eggs, plastic-wrapped raw meat, and blueberries in plastic boxes. But they will be given for unpackaged or partially packaged items, including fruits, vegetables, raw meat, seafood, and paper-packaged bread. In principle, only one free plastic bag is provided for each transaction. A spokesperson from Greenpeace said the environmental organization welcomes the government's proposed amendment. But she believes the wording on the bill can lead to subjective interpretations, which does not help the environmental cause. The proposed amendment will not affect free takeout plastic bags, and they will remain exempted from payment. That is because many people have made a habit of buying takeout food to avoid dining in, as the city continues to fight the pandemic. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
The Legislative Council has passed the second reading on the bill to scrap the mandatory Provident Fund offsetting mechanism.
And if the bill is passed eventually in the third reading tomorrow, it could mean the end of the years-long loophole that has allowed employers to deduct money from workers' pensions to cover severance and long service payments. Jackie Lynn with more.
After more than 10 years of discussions over two administrations, the controversial mandatory Provident Fund offsetting mechanism could be axed in 2025 at the earliest, should the bill pass its third reading. In the Legislative Council meeting today, many lawmakers threw their weight behind the bill. Some even sang to express their excitement.
It is so exciting to abolish the offsetting arrangement.
The long-anticipated bill won't have a retrospective period, but after the set cutoff date, employers can no longer dip into workers' pension to cover their severance and long service payments. Still, concerns linger.
MSME, will they employ employees with short-term contracts instead? Or will more grassroots workers have to become self-employed? These are very subtle changes, should be carefully monitored.
We have reservations. The timetable of abolishing the offsetting arrangement is somehow linked to the EMPF platform, and we don't accept that should be the case.
Meanwhile, some business sector lawmakers reluctantly agreed with the bill.
I agree that we should put a full stop to this contention that has plagued us for 10 years or so, reluctantly, and I cannot vote against to breach the consensus reached between the two sectors. And so when we come to the third reading of this bill, I will abstain. However, I hope the administration can understand the difficulties of the business sector.
To ease companies' pain during the transitional period, the government has pledged $33.2 billion to subsidize employers over a 25-year period. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
The city reported 558 new COVID-19 infections today, including 63 imported cases.
And 90 of the cases are from 87 schools. Caleb Leung has details.
Among the new infections reported today, 14 of them involved the BA.2 subvariant. One of the newly diagnosed patients, a 52-year-old woman, lives at Lu Shan Mansion in Taikoo Shing. The building earlier reported another infection, but that patient resides on a different floor with the unit facing a different direction. Another 2 cases visited a Shima Yunnan restaurant in City Plaza 2 on June 1st at around 2 p.m. Both patients live in the Eastern District, although the 2 do not know each other.
For BA.2, .12.1, we're seeing cases emerging in different districts. And similar to the characteristics of Omicron, perhaps for BA.2, .12.1, there may be silent transmissions that are hard to detect, sometimes in the same district, sometimes in the same building or in the same area frequented by many.
87 schools reported 94 new infections, including 61 students and 33 staff members. Singapore International School in Aberdeen will suspend classes for several days after 2 teachers and a staff member got infected. Kowloon Tong Fun Fu English Primary School reported 2 new cases, with both being close contacts of cases reported earlier. A janitor who works at the international section of Kiangsu and Chi Kiang Primary School in North Point has also come down with the coronavirus. The cluster at the Link Bar in Central reported 2 more cases, bringing the number of cases there to 95. Whole genome sequencing shows that the Link cluster and the Iron Ferris bar cluster share a similar substrain. 3 patients visited both bars last month, and the virus may have spread this way. As for the 63 imported cases, one of them arrived from the UK on May 29th. The traveler tested positive on his 9th day of arrival. The patient has visited Causeway Bay and Tsim Sha Tsui during his infectious period. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
The government has announced the second batch of overseas medical schools that would be recognized by the Special Registration Committee, meaning Hong Kong citizens who graduate there could be allowed to practice in Hong Kong. Among the 23 newly recognized institutions is Fudan University in Shanghai. It marks the first mainland university on the list. Other newly included institutions are from Australia, Canada, South Africa, the UK, and the US. So far, a total of 50 universities have been included on the list. Students from these institutions will be exempted from a licensing exam. The new list will be gazetted this Friday before it's taken for review in the Legislative Council next Wednesday. The United States may approve the use of the drug Novavax as a COVID-19 vaccine for use in adults.
This after advisors to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration recommended it as a choice for those skeptical of such vaccines. Matthew Bray reports.
Americans may soon get a new COVID-19 vaccine option, a more traditional shot known as a protein vaccine. The technology has been used for decades to prevent diseases including hepatitis B, shingles and other diseases. It is a very different approach from mRNA vaccines. The panel of said vaccine experts approved 21-0 with one abstention that Novavax, whose timeline is unclear, be recommended for those over 18. Next, the FDA must decide whether to approve the vaccine as a fourth option for adults.
So I think we speak to making available another option for those who might not otherwise take a vaccine, because right now any vaccine, even one that may need to be updated for the variants, right now getting that into someone's arm who has no vaccine is probably going to prevent them from having serious outcomes.
Novavax shots are already used in Australia, Canada, parts of Europe and dozens of other countries. US clearance is a key hurdle for the Maryland-based company. The vaccine is made with more conventional technology and would become the fourth approved vaccine in America. If the FDA authorises its use, it is not clear how widely it would be used. Around 27 million Americans remain unvaccinated. The shots are used elsewhere as a booster, regardless of which vaccine people got originally. Matthew Bray, TVB News.
Ukrainian troops holding out in what's left of Donetsk are under renewed heavy assault today. Russian forces are intent on capturing the industrial city, seen as key to control of the surrounding Luhansk region.
Russia now claims it controls 97% of one of the two provinces that make up Ukraine's Donbass.
Satellite images showed the extent of damage amid relentless shelling in the Luhansk and Donetsk regions. Dozens of craters in a field and damaged buildings in urban areas can be seen, all caused by artillery fire. Russian forces are focused on seizing Donetsk, which was home to more than 100,000 people. But the Luhansk region's governor says Ukrainian forces will not surrender the city. Luhansk and the adjacent province of Donetsk form the Donbass, which is claimed by Moscow for Russian-speaking separatists. The bodies of at least 210 Ukrainian servicemen who defended the southern city of Mariupol have been returned by Russia to Ukrainian authorities. In a video statement released on Tuesday, the country's defense intelligence said most of the fallen soldiers were killed defending the Azovstal steel plant. It is unclear how many bodies might remain at the plant. In a swap of military dead, Ukraine said the two sides exchanged 320 bodies in all. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky yesterday said Russia has lost more than 31,000 soldiers since launching its invasion in February. On social media, he said the war is costing Russia about 300 soldiers a day. Zelensky said a lack of hardware is preventing Ukrainian forces from advancing against the Russians, adding they need at least 10 times more military equipment and at least 10 times more people to advance. Germany says it's ready to ramp up its military mission in Lithuania. Berlin sent hundreds of additional troops to Lithuania after Russia invaded Ukraine and has deployed some 1,000 troops there as part of a German-led NATO combat unit. During a visit to the country, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz also said sanctions against Russia are proving effective. The European Union passed the sixth package of sanctions against Russia last Friday, with a focus on hitting Russian oil exports.
Russia said yesterday that two major Ukrainian ports on the Sea of Azov, seized by Russian forces, are ready to resume grain shipments, but Kyiv must first demine the approaches. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said the ports of Berdyansk and Mariupol have resumed operations. Since Russia seized large parts of Ukraine's coast, Ukrainian grain shipments from its Black Sea ports have stalled, and more than 20 million tons of grain are stuck in silos. Russia blames the situation on what it says are Ukrainian mines and on international sanctions against its own economy. Ukraine and the West accuse Moscow of weaponizing food supplies. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is visiting Turkey today to discuss United Nations proposals to restart grain exports from Ukrainian ports.
Sweden says it's ready to defend Gotland, a strategically significant Baltic Sea island. Sweden, along with Finland, are taking part in the two-week U.S.-led Baltic operations drill known as Baltops. As part of the annual NATO military exercise, forces performed an airdrop and an amphibious landing on the Swedish island. Gotland, with a population of 58,000, has long been a prized strategic asset in the Baltic Sea. Finland and Sweden are aspiring to join the NATO alliance, and Sweden is hosting part of this year's military exercise. More than 7,000 sailors, airmen, and Marines from 60 nations are taking part. Sweden re-established a garrison on the island in 2018 amid increased Russian military operations in the region following Moscow's annexation of Crimea in 2014. And still ahead after the break, the U.S., South Korea, and Japan call on North Korea to return to talks. The ICAC presses corruption charges against a former administrator of an ESF kindergarten. And heavy rain hits many parts of the city.
Welcome back to TVB News. North Korea is expected to conduct its first nuclear test in 5 years, and officials from the United States, South Korea, and Japan have met in Seoul to outline their strategy.
The number 2 diplomats from the 3 countries hit out at Pyongyang's recent spate of missile tests, urging leader Kim Jong-un to return to talks and accept offers of COVID-19 aid. Nazvi Karim has more.
Japan's Vice Foreign Minister Takeo Mori, his South Korean counterpart Cho Hyun-dong, and the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman reached out to Kim Jong-un during their meeting in Seoul, while at the same time warning Pyongyang over its recent provocative actions.
We urge the DPRK to cease taking these provocative and destabilizing actions and to commit to the path of diplomacy. The United States remains prepared to meet with the DPRK without precondition, and we reiterate again that we harbor no hostile intent toward the DPRK.
On Tuesday, the U.S. and South Korea staged a joint air drill to showcase the allies' battle readiness. It came a day after the 2 countries fired 8 surface-to-surface ballistic missiles in response to North Korea's launch of 8 short-range missiles on Sunday. It was reportedly Pyongyang's 18th missile test this year, and officials say the North has almost completed preparations for a detonation at its nuclear testing ground in the remote northwestern town of Ponggiri.
Back here in Hong Kong, the ICAC has pressed charges against a former administrator of the ESF Wu Kai-sha International Kindergarten for allegedly soliciting and accepting bribes. The suspect, Fatima Rumjan, allegedly accepted more than $900,000 from parents for assisting in their children's admission to kindergarten. 10 parents who had allegedly offered bribes were also charged. The parents came from 8 families. The case involved 13 students who made K-1 admission to the kindergarten for the 3 school years between 2019 and 2020 and 2021-2022. Chief Executive Designate John Lee has applied to have penalties waived over his late submission of consent in election advertisements. The writ filed in the High Court reads that Lee failed to submit on April 10th, 12th, and 17th copies of consent given in election advertisements. The 3 copies of consent in question were submitted 2 to 3 working days later than the specified time. According to the Electoral Procedure Chief Executive Election Regulation, anyone who doesn't comply with the requirements could be fined $5,000 or sentenced to jail time of 6 months.
The city was hit by heavy downpours today as the observatory issued successive amber and red rainstorm signals. A woman went missing while hiking in Tai Po. This morning at 9:45, the observatory issued the amber rainstorm signal before switching to the red signal in an hour's time. By 4:15 in the afternoon, the amber signal was back in force. Many parts of Hong Kong experienced more than 50 millimeters of rainfall, and Tai Po and the Islands District recording more than 90 millimeters. The Education Bureau suspended classes for afternoon schools. A 50-year-old woman went missing while hiking in the rain at Bride's Pool in Tai Po. In Sai Kung, a landslide struck Pak Tam Road, and firefighters were sent to the scene to find out if anyone was trapped there. That's the news. Thanks for watching.
Good night.